Is Tua Tagovailoa'S time in Miami already running out? The uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. What if everything you believed about your franchise quarterback was built on hope rather than reality? What if the massive contract extension you celebrated was actually the beginning of the end? For Miami Dolphins fans who've invested their hearts, their Sundays, and their unwavering faith in Tua Tagovailoa, these questions aren't just uncomfortable, they're downright terrifying. Yet here we are, forced to confront a possibility that seemed unthinkable just months ago. Tua's era in Miami might be reaching its premature conclusion. Jim Aiello, the Athletic, just dropped a truth bomb that's reverberating through South Florida like a Category 5 hurricane. According to his recent analysis, there exists a very real scenario where the upcoming season could be Tagovailoa'S last in a Dolphins uniform. Let that sink in for a moment. We're not talking about some distant, hypothetical future. We're talking about next year potentially being the end game for a quarterback Miami just committed $212 million to. How did we get here? And more importantly, how does Miami get out? Let's start with the elephant in the room, or rather, the repeated concussions that have defined Tua's career trajectory. The injuries have been devastating, not just his availability, but to his long-term prospects as a franchise cornerstone. Every helmet-to-helmet hit makes fans hold their breath. Every time he takes a big shot, you can feel an entire fan base collectively cringe, wondering if this is the one that ends everything. That's no way to build a championship team around someone. That's not stability. That's a ticking time bomb dressed up in aqua and orange. But here's where things get really complicated, really expensive, and really messy. Aiello lays out a scenario that should make every Dolphins executive lose sleep. Picture this. Miami limps through 2025 with a disappointing 5 or 6 wins. The pressure becomes unbearable. The fan base revolts. Ownership decides they've seen enough and implements a complete organizational reset. New general manager, new head coach, fresh perspective, clean slate. And this new regime takes one hard look at Tua Tagovailoa, with his concerning concussion history and his limitations as a pure pocket passer, and decides he's not their guy. He's not the foundation they want to build around. He's the expensive mistake they inherited. Now comes a financial nightmare that makes grown accountants weep. If the Dolphins were to simply cut Tua after this season, they'd be staring down an absolutely catastrophic $79 million dead cap hit. $79 million. That's not just a setback. That's franchise-crippling financial devastation. To put that in perspective, that would be the kind of money that hamstrings your ability to sign free agents, extend your own players, or build any semblance of a competitive roster for years. It would be organizational malpractice of the highest order. Yet, and this is the part that should terrify Dolphins fans, Aiello points out that $79 million wouldn't even set an NFL record for dead cap money. Let that reality wash over you. Teams have absorbed even bigger financial disasters and survived. It's painful, it's embarrassing, and it sets your franchise back years, but it's survivable, which means it's actually on the table as a legitimate option if things go sideways. The more palatable alternative? Trade Tagovailoa to a quarterback-needy team and recoup some value while avoiding that nuclear cap explosion. Aiello even floats the idea of shipping Tua to the New Orleans Saints, who've been desperately searching for stability at the position since Drew Brees retired. It's not a crazy idea. New Orleans has weapons. They have a decent offensive line. They have a defensive identity. What they don't have is a quarterback they trust to lead them anywhere meaningful. Could Tua be that guy? Maybe. Would it solve problems for both franchises? Potentially. But here's the fundamental question that keeps getting dodged in all these trade scenarios and financial calculations. Is Tua Tagovailoa actually a franchise quarterback? Not the Tua of our hopes and dreams. Not the Tua we want him to be. The actual Tua who shows up on Sundays with all his limitations and all his injury concerns. Because if he's not, if he's just a slightly above average quarterback who needs everything around him to be perfect to succeed, then Miami is already in serious trouble regardless of what they do next. The evidence is, at best, mixed. When Tua has elite weapons like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle running wild, when the offensive line give him time, when the play calling is sharp and the defense keeps games close, he can look spectacular. He can sling it. He can make plays. He can put up numbers that make highlight reels and fantasy football owners happy. But strip away those ideal conditions, ask him to elevate mediocre talent or overcome adversity, and things get shaky fast. That's not what franchise quarterbacks do. Patrick Mahomes makes everyone around him better. Josh Allen wills his team to victories. Joe Burrow carries an entire organization on his shoulders. Does Tua do any of that? Be honest with yourself. The concussion history adds another layer of complexity that can't be ignored. This isn't about toughness or questioning anyone's courage. This is about basic medical reality and long-term health. Tua has suffered multiple documented concussions, including some that were legitimately scary to watch in real time. Every time he steps on that field, there's legitimate concern about whether he's putting his long-term cognitive health at risk. That's not being dramatic. That's being realistic. And if you're a team trying to build around a quarterback for the next decade, that concern has to factor into your calculus. Miami's front office finds itself in an impossible situation. They just gave Tua a massive extension, publicly declaring him their guy for years to come. Walking that back after one disappointing season would be admitting a colossal mistake, the kind that gets people fired and becomes cautionary tales for future GMs. But the alternative, doubling down on a player who might not be capable of leading you where you need to go, could be even worse. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong before the mistake becomes irreversible. The 2025 season becomes absolutely critical in this scenario. Tua doesn't just need to stay healthy, though that's obviously paramount. He needs to prove he can be the guy in less than ideal circumstances. He needs to show he can elevate his team when everything isn't perfect. He needs to demonstrate he's worth that massive investment and that building around him makes sense. Because if he can't do those things, if 2025 is another injury-plagued, middling performance that leads to another mediocre record, then all bets are off. And let's talk about the ripple effects of this uncertainty. How do you build a roster when you don't know if your quarterback will be around? Do you go all in and try to win now with Tua, or do you start hedging your bets and planning for a future without him? Do you extend other players to long-term deals? Or do you keep things flexible in case you need to blow it all up? That uncertainty is poison for a franchise. It prevents you from making the kind of bold, decisive moves that championship teams make. It keeps you stuck in organizational purgatory. There's also the draft consideration. If Miami decides Tua isn't their long-term answer, they'd need to position themselves to draft his replacement. That likely means enduring another losing season, accumulating high picks, and potentially trading up if necessary. It means telling your fan base that the light at the end of the tunnel is actually years away, not months. It means patience in a league and a fan base that has very little patience left to give. The Saints trade scenario actually makes more sense than it initially sounds. New Orleans is in win-now mode with an aging roster and a Hall of Fame coach in Dennis Allen trying to maximize what's left of their championship window. They need a quarterback who can manage games, make quick decisions, and get the ball to their playmakers. That's actually Tua's strength profile. He'd have a top-tier running game, elite receivers in Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, and a defense that can still win games. Maybe a change of scenery, a new system, and different expectations would allow Tua to thrive in ways he couldn't in Miami. For Miami, moving Tua to New Orleans would accomplish multiple objectives. They'd get draft capital back. They'd avoid that catastrophic dead cap hit. They'd create the flexibility to either draft a new quarterback or pursue one in free agency. They'd signal to their fan base that they're serious about contending, even if it means making painful decisions. Sometimes addition by subtraction is real, and sometimes the best move is the one that breaks your heart. But let's not sugarcoat this. Trading away your 27-year-old starting quarterback, who you just extended, is an admission of colossal organizational failure. It's saying we misread the situation, we overestimated the player, and we need to start over. That's humiliating for everyone involved. That's the kind of decision that ends careers and destroys legacies. No front office wants to be in that position, which is why they'll probably cling to Tua longer than they should, hoping against hope that something clicks and validates their investment. The reality is that franchise quarterbacks are impossibly rare. Teams search for decades without finding one. Walking away from someone who might develop into that is terrifying because there's no guarantee you'll ever find better. The draft is a crapshoot. Free agency is unpredictable. You could easily trade Tua and spend the next 10 years cycling through journeyman and failed prospects, watching your former quarterback succeed elsewhere. That fear keeps teams paralyzed, unable to make the tough calls even when the writing is on the wall. So here we are, staring down a 2025 season that will define Tua Tagovailoa'S future and potentially the Dolphins' trajectory for the next decade. Can he stay healthy? Can he elevate his play? Can he prove he's worth the investment and the faith? Or will this be the beginning of the end? The season where Miami finally accepts what they've been afraid to admit and starts planning for life after their expensive mistake? The answers will reveal themselves over the coming months. But the questions are already keeping South Florida awake at night. Tua's time in Miami might not be over yet, but for the first time since he arrived, it feels like the clock is ticking down rather than building up. And that uncertainty might be the worst thing of all. What's your take on Tua's future in Miami? Should the Dolphins ride or die with their quarterback? Or is it time to start exploring other options? Drop your honest thoughts and comments. No save takes allowed. And smash that like button if you appreciate analysis that doesn't pull punches. This situation is developing fast, and we'll be tracking every twist and turn. See you in the next one.